welcome to Hard Knock Life. I am Keith Chow.
I'm Brittany Monet.
Hi, I'm Dominic Ma.
We are back. We got a lot to talk about. In fact, Dominic has an interview with the author Claire Light. They're going to be talking about her new project, as well as Western pop culture's obsession with the Monkey King all of a sudden. But before we get to that, we have to talk about all of the animated series announcements that came out over the last several days, including a new Batman the Animated Series, which is, mind-blowing.
Yes.
But before we get to that, the one thing I want to touch on in the world of Marvel Cinematic Universe, because again, we're the Marvel shills, we have to talk about the MCU on every podcast. And there's no Disney show until Loki in a couple weeks. But the big news from MCU this week is that Kevin Feige had a revelation. And it's not that you can film sunsets in camera without CGI.
Which Chloe Zhao shows us we can do.
This week's Kevin Feige revelation is that maybe it was a mistake to cast a white lady as the Ancient One in Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
He said something to the effect of, we thought we were being hip and cool or different. I didn't know the exact wording.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty verbatim, actually.
Yeah, because, again, I think they were, trying to avoid, the stereotype of casting an Asian person in that role. And how it has often, when we do see that type of role, it has been a negative stereotype. So, that's what they were trying to avoid doing. But at the same time, then it was just they didn't think about, well, maybe if you actually maybe hired an Asian person to consult with, you could have avoided anything that would have been problematic.
Yeah, this is the thing that was galling about that particular instant. Because, the worry about being offensive ends up in erasure.
Right.
And it also happened with, there was a character who was supposed to be Nico Minoru's mom. But in Doctor Strange, that even there was, one of the supporting cast of mystical people was at one point Nico Minoru's mom. Nico Minoru is one of the lead characters in The Runaways. Her mom is this evil sorceress. But again, because they were touchy, we don't know if we want to have the evil Asian magic lady, they just didn't have her in the movie. And just, to break it down, if your diversity casting thought process ends up with just erasing people of color from the movie, you haven't done anything.
Just because Asian Americans of a certain age have an obsession with the band erasure doesn't mean that's how we want our Hollywood roles to be.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Yeah, Erasure's a great band.
I don't understand why so many Asian Americans.
Not a good result for representation.
No, that's the other thing too, right? Because even back in 2015, this was the argument, right? Look, we're making her a Celtic lady because had we made her an Asian lady, we'd be reinforcing Asian stereotypes. And, we argued here at the Nerds of Color, first of all, this isn't a new revelation, Kevin Feige, because we said this shit 6 years ago. But anyway, we said at the same time, here's how you solve that problem. You write the character exactly the way you did for Tilda Swinton, and then you cast Michelle Yeoh, right? Because clearly the role was complex enough for Tilda Swinton, because Tilda Swinton's not the type of actress who's just going to take a cardboard cutout of a role.
Oh,
right?
yeah, no, not at all. Even if it is something like Marvel. And
Ancient One ultimately turned out to be a badass. She's really cool in Doctor Strange. And her appearance in Endgame is really cool, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because they made the character really cool. So why did that have to also couple with... But if that character was an Asian person, then it's a problem, right? It's this idea that, just the existence of an Asian person is the stereotype and not the way you write the character.
Yes, I think that's what it is. They don't realize that it's the way you write the character and not necessarily, the race of the person. Same thing when you have, black people playing gangsters and, playing black people or slaves. It's not so much putting black people in those roles. It's how you're writing the roles, and that's what I think the people need to realize. That's it's okay if you're casting a person of color in something that is considered a stereotype for them, as long as you're writing them in a way that's nuanced.
Then they're not a stereotype. That's how you erase the stereotype.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's such a good point, Keith, because somehow it gets in their thought process that just the mere act of casting an Asian person will become a stereotype. That's all Asian people in movies are stereotypes. Thus, we can't have any. So you circle back to this stupidity. But also, I want to co-sign. Tilda Swinton's great.
Yeah.
I love Tilda Swinton. She's awesome in the part. And we should also mention that under your theory, like Michelle Yeoh would be a great idea for Ancient One. Ancient One is technically supposed to be Tibetan, so again, we have the cross-Asian casting controversy, bias towards East Asians as usual. But also, I didn't really care so much about the Tibetan Asian One problem, whatever I just said, the Ancient One problem.
The ancient Tibetan one problem too. That's how China refers to the Dalai Lama, I think.
Right, yeah, I think it is literally exact translation. So that would have also been confusing in the marketing in China. But that whole controversy kind of elided the achievement, which was that Wong was introduced, and Wong is a perfectly good Asian American superhero character. He just happens to be a guy. So again, and that might have been on the fandom, that Asian American reactionary side being like zeroing in on this, that we don't have a Asian person as the Ancient One. We don't have this, blah, blah, blah. But we kind of forgot, like, it's cool to have a interesting character who is Wong, Wong, very much a stereotype, classically. He's sort of the bald manservant of Doctor Strange. But he was cool in that movie. They had a cool repartee, and Benedict Wong does a great job as him.
And, I argued back in 2015 as well that, like, if you didn't want to have the controversy over a white Ancient One, then make Doctor Strange Asian American, right? Like, it's the same argument that we made for Iron Fist and ultimately Snake Eyes, right? It's this idea that Doctor Strange is in that long lineage of white guy goes to Asia to become best Asian and come back a superhero, right? And then the funny thing is, at the time, Kurt Busiek actually put a Twitter thread together about how, the way you look at those early Doctor Strange comics, Steve Ditko might have intended for him to be Asian to begin with, right? Like, there's that whole thing, too, about Doctor Strange. So, yeah, it's just funny that on the cusp of the Shang-Chi movie, Kevin Feige's like, can I get a mulligan on the Doctor Strange casting, please? And here we are.
Yeah, it felt course correcting because of Shang-Chi's coming out, and they're trying to like avoid any of that talk maybe on the press tour. So he's like, let me apologize for this now, so that they try to avoid that topic as much as possible when the press tour happens, if there is a press tour. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because the Tony Leung casting as the Mandarin is the perfect time to like talk about how can you cast a stereotypical character and not make that character stereotypical.
It also sort of retcons the Mandarin that was in Iron Man 3. And,
right.
Yeah, like that was another like sidestep of like, let's not have the like, because Ben Kingsley is like part Asian, right?
Yeah, he is.
And,
he's part Indian, as if I remember. Yeah.
He is. But the thing about Iron Man 3 is that what they revealed was that, yes, Trevor was not the Mandarin, but it was Guy Pearce all along. Right?
Yeah.
Like that, again, that doesn't help anybody that like, the ancient stereotypical character is actually a white guy.
And that's why it's like they're shooting themselves in the foot, because I mean I like Iron Man 3 pretty much, but they went through hoops to like get around that whole just have a Chinese guy as the Mandarin thing.
They could
broke their own back trying to be like, oh no, he's just sort of mysteriously from the East, but he's not Chinese, and then he's not really that guy either. It's like, what?
Yeah.
What's cool, though, is that, like, you can take these iconic characters, and we talk about this all the time, like, right? Take iconic characters, and if you race bend them, I think that works when that character's whiteness is not, censor to who they are, right?
Yes.
And we argue all the time about Iron Fist, was that, like, it wasn't his whiteness that sets him apart, right? It's his Americanness. And unless you equate American with white, Danny Rand could literally be any race. And you're seeing this, like, that's the philosophy of race bending that I can jive with, is like, unless the character's whiteness is at the front of that character, not just because we default to whiteness, then that character can literally be any race.
Yeah,
and that's how we get, like, Invincible casting. And speaking of Invincible, where you take an animated series and cast an Asian American in the lead, there's a bunch of animated series that were announced this past week, and a bunch of them have Asian American leads. But the one I want to focus on first are a couple announcements from DC Comics. We're getting on HBO Max at some point in the near future a new Batman the Animated Series. Not a continuation, I don't think, of the original animated series.
I don't think so either. I think it's going to be Robert Pattinson.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's Bruce Timm is back, and he's got J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves to do, like, I guess the development of the series. So no Paul Dini, which is a little. I think people forget, like, the original BTAS, they call it the Timverse, but it's very much Paul Dini's universe. The reason we love Batman the Animated Series is Paul Dini's writing more than necessarily Bruce Timm's designs. And not even that. It's like Paul Dini's writing, Bruce Timm's design, Shirley Walker's music, like all of that together. Andrew Romano's casting, right? That's why we love Batman the Animated Series. Anyway, so there's that. But the one I'm really excited for is an animated series called My Adventures with Superman, which reconfigures the Superman story and has Jimmy, Clark, and Lois all as like cub reporters at the Daily Planet, kind of getting into hijinks. And what's cool about that show is that they cast an Asian American woman to play Lois Lane, and they've drawn Jimmy to be African American. They didn't announce who's voicing him. So we're having a Superman show with a black Jimmy Olsen, which is not new since Mehcad Brooks played him on Supergirl, and an Asian American Lois Lane played by Alice Lee from Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. So that's the kind of race bending I can get behind, because Lois Lane felt Asian American to me, especially on the animated series. Brittany, this is I feel like I'm in my element with you again, since this is like we're talking about DC comic shows on
yeah, I know. This is like what we used to do. I think it's obvious that I've always loved like Batman the Animated Series. If you followed me and Keith podcasting together, then you know that Batman the Animated Series is my jam. But I do think it's going to be Robert Pattinson's Batman. I don't think it's a continuation of it. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. At least to me, because they're being very vague on the details. But
I mean, Matt Reeves is involved.
That's why I thought, too. That was my, like, logical jump, that it's, it's that. But I'm really excited to see an Asian American Lois Lane. Because, like you said, that was a character that felt like it, and then that she could be. So it's nice to see that. And I really did like Mehcad as Jimmy Olsen, and I talked about it kind of, I think, briefly, that I was really upset that they decided to, like, axe the romance between him and oh my god, I'm forgetting Supergirl's name. Kara. Because of, horrible racist people.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what they're going to do with that show. And speaking of stuff we used to talk about together in one of the other shows they announced, Nick Lang, our fellow co-host, always wanted to talk about Crypto the Superdog. We never got to, and now they're doing it with The Rock.
They are. The Rock is Crypto. He's not only Black Adam, he's a multiverse in and of himself, playing Crypto and DC Super Pets. Yes. We need to revive DC TV classics just so Nick can talk about Crypto the Superdog.
Yes.
Okay, well, clearly I need to meet this Nick, but who are the other super pets? I don't know.
There's Ace the Bat Hound.
Ace the Bat Hound.
Streaky the Super Cat. That's Kara's pet.
Streaky?
Yeah, she's a ginger cat.
LOL.
And I don't know any other super pet.
Is there a Green Lantern animal? Doesn't he just like make a little, snake for himself made out of... Yeah.
Yeah, I only know... Well, I think there's actually a Comet the Super Horse. It's
I do remember the Super Horse. Superman has a whole little farm.
Beppo the Super Monkey.
And...
Oh, there's a lot of monkeys, actually, because the Wonder Twins had... what's his name?
They have Gleek.
Gleek, that's right.
Who was almost on live-action TV in that Crisis
in the Crisis,
event,
yeah. You see his, I think, his cage or something inside the Hall of Justice.
I was just curious because I didn't know about it much beyond the announcement, and the announcement so far is that The Rock will voice Crypto in this animated Justice League of Animals.
So interesting.
Man.
Yeah, because there was a Crypto cartoon a few years ago. I don't know if you guys remember, on Cartoon Network, and I didn't watch it, so I don't know anything about it. But I couldn't picture Dwayne Johnson's voice as Crypto. But although he's a great voice actor, because he's great in Moana.
Does that mean? I mean, Crypto doesn't talk that much, does he? Have we had this series where we were in Crypto's head and he talks?
Well, it's a cartoon, so like the animals talk to each other.
Yeah, no, but I mean, would that be the new thing in this cartoon? Would it be like they are anthropomorphized, whatever that word is, more than anthropomorphized, and that they talk more than Crypto just doing like super barking? I mean, obviously, because they're getting humans to voice it.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. I think it's very much like a kid's movie kind of thing, where like the animals talk to each other, and then like the humans don't understand what they're saying, I'm sure, but the barking.
Aw.
Yeah. I guess. I don't know. I'm curious who Ace the Bat Hound's going to be now, because
George Clooney, maybe.
Oh my god.
I remember a few years ago there was an internet meme. I don't know if it's meme's the right word, whatever the internet jargon is or like internet theory that Batman is actually asexual. And, I thought, that makes sense because, he's the one character, at least before the Tom King stuff, that like never really had like the love interest. Like there's no Lois Lane or Iris West to Batman. I mean, I guess you could say Selena Kyle was the closest, but even then it's like not really. Anyway, but like I remember thinking, well, he does have a dog named Ace, and that might have something to do with it.
Wow. Didn't even think about that. Yeah, he's projecting onto his dog. Ace
anyway.
being the cool shorthand for
I'm
asexual.
I'm a Wonder Bat shipper, though. So.
Well, that's true.
You're a Wonder Bat shipper?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's happened a couple times, or hasn't?
It's heavily hinted at in the Justice League cartoon. I don't think it's ever been consummated in any version.
Yeah, no. That is where I got it from. I want it to happen because I deserve this. But,
you do.
You know.
It would be quite a moment.
If he ends up being, Bruce is also asexual, that's fine. I'm not gonna be one of those assholes that throws a fit over
the sexuality of fictional characters.
Yeah. I don't know. Some people take it way too far. I don't see. I don't know.
Well, I always want it to happen because I think Batman takes it too far in that he's actually verging on sociopathic. I mean, he doesn't like people. I mean, one thing he is missing this thing of having a companion partner or someone he has hearts to heart with. I mean, the closest thing is his fucking butler. And then, I mean, he has these young wards, which often ends problematically. I mean, and I never even got the impression that he liked animals that much. So, he's
except bats.
He's got this kind of streak in him.
Since we're talking about Batman sexuality somehow, why am I even saying something? I'm the one who brought it up.
You did bring it up, Keith.
I want to circle back to Batman Caped Crusader, which is the Bruce Timm animated series that's coming out. Because, again, people are praising it, and I am praising it too. It's really cool to see a return to, whatever version of the Bruce Timm verse this show will end up being. But I also want to point out that Bruce Timm hasn't batted 1,000 when it came to Batman animated series, right? We're really happy about the original Batman the animated series, but let's not forget he's been responsible for a bunch of animated Batman movies that haven't been great, to put it mildly. And one of them is the Killing Joke movie that Bruce Timm was the producer of, in which they took a relatively thin comic book story and turned it into a movie, so they had to add a bunch of shit. And some of the shit that they added is that, apparently Batman and Batgirl were fucking.
Oh,
which
I sort of remember this. Yeah,
which, again, to your point about, his relationship with his Robins, the Batman Batgirl, especially Barbara version of Batgirl, has always been, a father-daughter type thing, and especially considering that she is actually Gordon's daughter.
Yeah.
that whole subplot, I don't know if you guys even watched the Killing Joke movie, but that whole added subplot was the ickiest thing that I've ever seen.
I don't know why I finally saw it. I really don't know why they added that in there. That was not necessary. It was the worst. And
that's all Bruce Timm, baby.
Huh.
So that I do have some pause when it comes to again, Bruce Timm without Paul Dini, isn't necessarily a good thing. And we'll see how J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves contribute to this, but...
Well, do you think, could we use that to talk about a broader aspect of the DC animated films, since we're talking about this release of a whole bunch of them, which is that they have a brand, and they're really dark. Really dark.
Yeah.
Really violent. Not like fun exploding violence, seriously upsetting violence in a lot of ways. And there are tons of them. And I've never been clear if they have a rating system, if there's if they have dark, medium dark, and super dark ones, because I didn't want to watch that Killing Joke animated film, specifically because the Killing Joke is already a pretty brutal story, and I didn't want to watch that particular story longer and animated.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I've only seen a few of them. I remember Flashpoint Paradox, part of the plot line hinges on the fact that, speaking of Wonder Bad, that's Wonder Arthur, I guess, is the shit, because the whole Atlantis, and this might be taken from New 52, I'm not sure, but the whole Atlantis Themysciran War was predicated on the fact that Wonder Woman and Aquaman were fucking, but then Mira found out, so Wonder Woman beheads her.
Yeah.
And that's how the war starts,
fuck? Well, there's something even more disconcerting about watching it in the animated space. Do you know what I mean? I mean, Brittany, have you picked this up about the DC animated films? Am I making this up, or are there
No, I do
people
think
getting
they are
shot and killed all the time?
They're a little bit darker, but I also think it's because we've in a society we've animation is for kids, and I feel like that's also the issue too.
Sure,
is I feel like animation could work for any age range when you're telling a story, and I feel like that's my issue. Is also sometimes it's superheroes in animation are for kids, they're not for adults. I often hate that argument because sometimes storylines, even if they're not doing anything gory, like some storylines are not for children.
Right.
But I feel like people have this reductionist idea, I don't know if that's the right word, of like, oh, it's for kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Killing Joke from Jump is not for kids. Like,
oh yeah, it's not for kids.
So like, they can't even start that project. I mean, just like you say, they can't.
But I'm just saying, a lot of people generalize it and be like, oh, animation is for kids, superheroes are for kids. So it fairy tales are for kids. Like,
they are gorier than the live action things.
They are, yes.
Saying, which is like,
but I think it's also because maybe it's easier to animate. I feel like comic books and animation is actually the best form because it's closest to the actual comic book medium, and you can do a lot of the stuff that, like, you don't have to worry about an actor falling to their death, unfortunately, or something. Mm-hmm. But it is a little bit violent, but I feel like I don't mind depending on the story.
And then, Brittany, that mindset is a very American one if you think about it, right? This notion that, like, animation is for kids. Because if you go to Japan, for example, like, they have animation that's for kids, and they have animation that's definitely not for kids. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to tell in the difference because, you know, again, if your Western mind thinks, oh, drawings and cute, you know, characters must be for children, and then you watch it and it's like, oh, why are there tentacles in this movie?
I was just gonna say, if there's octopus tentacles,
that's why there are tentacles in this film.
What are those tentacles for? Oh. oh, my octopus. Oh, how cute. Because sometimes all you have is that square thumbnail to go on, you know, in our streaming era, and you don't have enough information. But
well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, like, you know, oftentimes the animation is more brutal than the live action, and that, you know, cartoons are actually the best way to depict superhero movies, because there's one more DC announcement before we get to the other animated things I wanted to talk about, was an Injustice movie coming. And it's interesting that, like, the Injustice movie is coming as they are, you know, not restoring the Snyderverse. Yep. But in a way, the Injustice movie is pretty much Justice League 2. the Snyder Cut 2, as it were.
I mean, just for context, Injustice is based on the video game. In theory, it's based on the Injustice video games, which are the Mortal Kombat versions of the DC fighting games. And, like, maybe you guys can help me. I don't remember who exactly started the story, if it was Grant Morrison. Like, the future Justice League story that was probably going to be the Snyderverse story, it has something to do with, like, Lois Lane is possessed by Darkseid or Brainiac. I can't remember. There are different versions of it, and she suffers a terrible end, and Superman goes crazy and either commits suicide or goes evil or something. Anyway, does this all sound familiar? It sounds like what the Snyderverse sequel is going to be, right?
Well, the Snyderverse movies were definitely going to be about Darkseid coming to Earth. Somehow Batman would be responsible for Lois's death, and Clark would blame Batman, and that's why he goes evil and scorches the planet.
Yeah,
on the behest of Darkseid. And then the remaining Justice League, because Wonder Woman dies and Aquaman dies, which we see in the Snyder Cut. And so Batman sends the Flash back in time to warn himself about Superman murdering everybody, which is that scene from BVS, which makes no sense. Right. and I guess somehow they time it just right so that he's able to warn Batman to not... Oh, and that was the other thing. Batman and Lois Lane have an affair in the second Snyder Cut sequel.
Hey.
So there goes that Wonder Bat.
Not shipping that one is hard.
Lois Bat.
They just don't want me to be happy.
Well,
but yeah, in both cases, Lois Lane dies, Superman turns evil, because, again, people can only dig Superman if he turns evil for whatever reason.
So Injustice is a lot of that. It's a lot of Superman turns evil in the future, and there's the heroes divide up and team with or against him. It's sort of like a better executed version of DC's Civil War. So I can't say like I'm excited that there'll be an animated version of that, but it does seem an interesting kind of sidesteppy, like we're gonna play with getting you that dark Snyderverse-y Justice League future story, but not quite. Maybe we'll test the waters with an Injustice movie, an animated movie.
And would be dope if they just get the Justice League actors to voice their characters. Like, and then they announce the cast. Ben Affleck is Batman. What? Gal Gadot is Wonder Woman. Say what? Henry Cavill is Superman. So Injustice is coming, and if you want to get your Snyder Cut 2 fix, just watch Injustice, because that's where that movie was going anyway. Before we wrap, I did want to talk about a few other animated series that were announced. Yeah, so one show that Netflix announced is based on a Filipino comic book called, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Trace. It's based on a Filipino comic book. It's going to be dubbed in English by Filipino American actors, including Darren Criss.
Oh.
And yeah, it's all of the voice actors for the English dub are going to be Filipino Americans, and then the Tagalog, the original Tagalog dub will be an option as well. So that's I think the first like Filipino comic books turned animated series, and that's coming to Netflix. Netflix also announced, and that's more adult. To talk about the difference between like
it looks pretty gory,
cartoons for kids and cartoons for adults, because it's a horror story basically. But in the other side of animation, they announced a bunch of series, including one by Greg Pak called Mech Cadets. And if you're not familiar with the Boom Studios comic book that he wrote with Takeshi Miyazawa, it's about a boy named Stanford at this like giant robot school who dreams of becoming a giant robot pilot. And that story actually got its start in the second Secret Identities anthology, Shattered, as a story called Los Robos. And now that's a big Netflix series. So congratulations, Greg Pak. Another animated series that they announced is based on the Monkey King. And I think Stephen Chow is a co-executive producer, which if you're not familiar with Stephen Chow, he's the guy behind The God of Cookery, The God of Gambling, and also for Western audiences, Shaolin Soccer and Kung Fu Hustle. And he's doing a Monkey King animated series.
Wait, Kung Fu Hustle, like the comedy movie?
Yeah. Stephen Chow. My brother's idol. He loves Stephen Chow. And he's doing a Monkey King animated series with Netflix, again with an Asian American, for the English voice cast, Asian American actors. And yeah, it's just, it's kind of cool that if we were kids, these are the kinds of shows that we could watch and not have to feel like we have to root for the Snake Eyes and assuming he's Asian. Like, we actually get Asian protagonists in all of these animated series.
Stephen Chow is next level. But wait, Keith, let's get back to the Secret Identities thing for just a second.
Sure.
Because this is very exciting, is it not? It's an expansion of the Secret Identities stories and the universe. Yeah,
kind of. I mean, I'm not going to take credit for like Greg Pak's success. I mean, Greg's, he doesn't need us to be Greg Pak. But it is true that like in Shattered actually was the publication debut of two pretty big deal Asian American characters, in that it was the first appearance of the Mech Cadet characters in Greg's story. And also Gene Yang originated the Shadow Hero comic that he did ultimately in Shattered. That was the one where he took the Green Turtle, which was public domain golden age superhero character who was created by an Asian American writer back in the 30s, but could never, depict the character being Asian because it was the 30s.
Right.
And then 80 years later, when it became in the public domain, Gene and Sonny Liu, basically took that story and presented it in the way that it was always intended, as this Asian American superhero character. But the very first Shadow Hero story was also in that same anthology, Shattered. So I'm going to drop a link, just shameless self-promotion.
No,
I'm going to drop a link to Shattered. If you want to see the very first appearance of Stanford Yu and his robots. Check that out. It's going to be awesome on Netflix.
And these are creator-owned stories, are they not?
Yeah. All the Secret Identities contributors own the rights to their own characters and stories, of course. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's worth it to praise Greg a bit, because Greg Pak has been in the trenches of this representation in comic books thing for quite a while, and he's done whether it's Secret Identities or Agents of Atlas, and of course he and all the excellent artists were behind the premise of one of the funnest Marvel movies, which is Thor Ragnarok.
I love Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah, it's such a good movie. It's all in this world that they created in the World War Hulk, or whatever the first part of it was called, that Hulk series.
Yeah.
And so he's just been doing great work. So I think it's great to see one of his creator-owned stories, take a next step.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mech Cadets, it was also a big successful hit for Boom Studios. Where he actually expanded on the story that he originated in Secret Identities and did a multi-issue arc. And for Boom Studios, now that it's getting an animated series based on his Boom Studios run, is, again, to your point, like, if anyone in comics deserves more recognition and more success, it's Greg Pak, because like that dude's been doing it for years.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I also I didn't want to not name the third of the kid friendly animated series that was announced by Netflix, but there's also a show called Boons and Curses, which is a comedy action series by Jaideep Harshajani, and it's based on South Asian myths and legends. So like that trio of animated series are all coming in the next year or two to Netflix. And it's just really cool, again, to have like all of this representation. And, you know, they're just getting it in under the wire for AAPI Heritage Month, all of these announcements. But I did want to dig into a little bit about The Monkey King, because Dominic, you talked with the writer Claire Light about her new project and this kind of like preponderance of Monkey King stories in the West, including one that we talked about a couple weeks ago with my friend Jerry. Speaking of secret identities, Jerry Ma doing a Monkey King Kickstarter, which he's now surpassed many of his stretch goals and is now handing out cash in Chinatown to all of the businesses.
So you keep saying, I almost want to go to Chinatown and see if I can run into Jerry Ma and get a red envelope.
He is actually canning them out in red envelopes.
And this is all part of the master plan. Yeah, I got to chat with Claire Light, aka JD Jang. That's the pen name that she used to write this novel called Monkey Around, which is coming out in a little bit. And as you say, it's part of a cluster of projects involving the Monkey King or Journey to the West, which is, you know, maybe our oldest East Asian superhero. The Monkey King could be considered. And the cool thing about her angle is it's a young woman in this case who is embodying the Monkey King. And if you know stuff about the Monkey King, you know one of his principal powers is being a shapeshifter, being a trickster like Loki. So really, you don't necessarily need to assign a gender to the Monkey King. He can be all things. Anyway, so I have a bit of an interview with her, and we'll work that into the episode somehow.
Yep. Again, the Monkey King is having research, and all of that is of course, you know, we started this podcast talking about the DC Comics universe, and you know, he is the latest addition to the DC universe, the Monkey King, or I guess the Monkey Prince, created by the aforementioned Gene Yang and Bernard Chang, who is another Secret Identities alum. So yeah, the Monkey King is having a moment, and we're going to play that interview between Dominic and Claire in a moment, and then come back after the break for our What's Nerd Poppin'.
Hi, this is Dominic Ma with Nerds of Color, and I'm here with... Oh, wait, okay. Well, we're still recording, but I didn't ask you the pertinent question. Are you going by Claire Light or JD Jang?
You could say Claire Light, writing as JD Jang.
Okay, so it's not a secret, either of those names?
It's not a secret. It's just a way of categorizing my different writing.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I published a book of short stories about 11 years ago, and they're very, very kind of like dark themed science fiction, sort of literary science fiction, and this book is very, very genre, very commercial, very like kind of light and happy ending kind of thing, fun and action oriented and happy ending. So you know that a lot of what happens between a reader and a book has to do with the reader expectations. So I'm using a pseudonym so that people who read my previous book, all 200 of them, don't come into this expecting something like that. And the people who read this and go looking for other things by me don't find the other book and get disappointed. It's about reader expectations.
Right. That seems very sensible. You have different flavors working as an artist. And
yeah,
why not have a couple different names? I mean, you have two different superhero names, if I may. I may say. The interview is totally going, by the way, right now. I mean, two really good, like, secret identity names for, you know, superhero alter egos. Did you think about that?
I didn't think about that, but I've been told already a couple of times that JD Jang is a perfect, because of the alliteration, it's a perfect
Peter Parker, Clark Kent.
And then Diana McQueen, of course, was deliberately chosen for the alliteration and the you know, the hints at her identity. So yeah.
Maya McQueen is the main character of Monkey Around.
Yes, she's
Okay.
my protagonist.
Sorry, we're looping around to it, but we're here to discuss Monkey Around, which is a novel coming out written by J.D. Jang, aka Claire Light. And it's a version of the Monkey King myth in modern day, I might say, in very broad terms. Full disclosure, I've read just the first couple chapters. You want to talk about what the premise of Monkey Around is a bit?
Yes. So Monkey Around is an urban fantasy that takes place in the San Francisco Bay Area. And the central character is Maya McQueen, who was a foster child who was adopted at the age of 8 and raised by a white couple in Chicago. She had been left on a fire station doorstep, has no idea who she is, but she discovers as she grows up that she naturally turns into a monkey. And
Naturally,
she just kind of wakes up sometimes and she's a monkey.
naturally.
And as she grows up, she discovers that she has certain abilities that she can control, including she can control when she turns into a monkey as well. But she can take on any shape. She can pull hairs out of her head, or in monkey form, hairs off of her body, and turn them into things or people or creatures that she can control. She has the ability to...
The very fun old school Monkey King power for those of you who struggle with body hair, weird places. You think it might be a weird thing. You can envision it as this thing that Monkey King does, which he turns it into weapons and various tools that he needs. He's a great shapeshifter, alchemist type.
And it's one of those weird, specifically East Asian superpowers that you don't find in Western heroes or monsters or superheroes. So I particularly love that power. But she can also fly on clouds. She can call down clouds, step onto them, and fly off. And she has the ability to acquire martial arts skills incredibly rapidly, almost upon sight, and can fight incredibly well. And her final ability for now is that she can see deception. Her eyes burn when someone is deceiving her or deceiving the world or wearing a glamour or using some kind of magic to create an illusion. So all of these are Monkey King abilities. The Monkey King actually has more than that, but this is what Maya has discovered about herself so far. So when the book starts, she's 25 years old and she's living in the Bay Area because she went to Berkeley for Asian American Studies. So Maya looks mixed race, or she and the whole world think she looks mixed race because, like the rhesus macaque monkey, which is the type of monkey the Monkey King is, rhesus macaques have sort of pinkish white skin on their faces, and they have golden brown fur. And the Monkey King is depicted in Chinese pop culture as having white or pink facial skin and golden, either brown, red, or blonde fur.
Yeah.
And
almost as if in a costume for, a theatrical production of something. That's what always struck me from depictions of Monkey King.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very much, they're very heavily made up. Lots of fur, lots of hair, lots of costumes. But anyway, Maya looks. If you Google image search, Jet Li as Monkey King or Donnie Yen as Monkey King, and make them look a little more human. That's what Maya looks like. She has very pale skin, pink cheeks, and a golden blonde hair in her human form, but very Chinese features. So she thinks she's mixed race, and she thinks she might also be mixed species, some kind of very powerful supernatural creature, as well as human, but she's not sure. And she's been trying to find out. The problem is, when she first got to college, she was sort of smacked down by a Chinese studies professor who was having a bad day. And so her imposter syndrome bloomed, and she has developed a block against investigating Chinese culture, which is why she hasn't figured out that she's a monkey king.
Okay.
For now. So this is Maya's backstory. And in the course of the book, she investigates a supernatural series of murders and gets involved with Occupy Oakland. This is in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And falls in love more than once with two different guys. It's a classic love triangle, both of whom are also supernats. And gets into a lot of fights, which she really enjoys. She loves fighting. And plays a few pranks.
Cool. Okay, wait, let's back up a second for context, because I'd like to give everyone a sort of intro to the Monkey King if they're not familiar. And like, okay, I'll start and jump in any time because I'm sure I'm going to get some of this wrong. Can we say the starting point for the Monkey King was probably from this important Ming Dynasty novel called Journey to the West, a Chinese novel, which was...
Journey to the West does draw off of centuries of myths and legends and folk tales.
Right, so it's probably much older than that.
Yes.
Right, okay.
The novel, interestingly enough, is based on a true story, even though there's demons and witches and all sorts of things. The novel is based on the true story of a Chinese monk who went to India and brought back some Buddhist sutras. His name was Xuanzang, and he is kind of credited as the originator of Chinese Buddhism.
Right.
And he did actually exist, and he did actually make the journey. But in the book, the journey is dangerous because Chinese demons love to eat the flesh of holy men and heroes because it gives them immortality or gives them longevity. So, and he is the holiest, Xuanzang is the holiest of holy men. So, and he's a Buddhist, so he can't kill, he can't harm. So he is traveling across these demon-infested lands and has no fighting skill. And even if he had fighting skill, he wouldn't be permitted to fight. So Guangong, the goddess of mercy, tasks 3 demons and a dragon with accompanying him, a mini dragon with accompanying him, and the dragon turns into a horse. So the horse carries him, and the 3 demons are on a redemption arc. And just for clarification, in Chinese culture, supernatural creatures are either gods or demons, depending on whether you do good or do bad. And a god can easily turn into a demon and vice versa, because the terms gods and demons, they're, actually English terms anyway, they're Western concepts. In China, the god, the demon, the ghost are all kind of part of a continuum. And a lot of gods in the Chinese pantheon were actually real people who were elevated to gods after death because of their heroism. So the Monkey King is considered a demon because he fell afoul of the bureaucratic Chinese heaven. And the other 2 demons, Pigsy and Sandy, Pigsy's a pig demon and Sandy's a river demon, also committed crimes, and all 3 were captured and condemned to on this redemption arc to accompany the monk to the west to pick up the Indian sutras and bring them back, and along the way they become enlightened.
Yeah. And they have sort of super-powered road trip adventures.
Exactly.
Unlike the Odyssey and things like that, which is why it is such an endearing tale in books, comic books, movies.
Probably the best known traditional legend, traditional mythology, traditional story in the East Asian sphere. And China and Japan and I think Korea and Vietnam as well have, but mostly China and Japan have produced a jillion movies and TV shows and comic books and anime and yada, 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 based on Journey to the West. It's kind of like, if this means anything to anyone, it's kind of like the Ramayana in India.
Sure.
And in fact, a lot of people think that the Monkey King is based on on the story of
Yeah, I always thought of him as
Hanuman. Hanuman, that's his name. Sorry,
Wait, say it again.
Hanuman.
Oh, okay. They
Yeah.
might be related. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, that's deep. All right. Yeah. So I always thought of him as sort of between Robin Hood and Thor, sort of in the world mythology spectrum.
That's a pretty good placement. Except he would be more Loki than Thor, because he's a trickster.
Sure.
And he's and I'm not a
shape-shifting energy.
Yes, and shape-shifting energy and witchy kind of powers. And I haven't read a lot of Loki comics, so I'm not sure whether he's portrayed as good, bad, or trickster. But tricksters are typically neither good nor bad. They're sort of both. They cause chaos. They're agents of chaos and agents of change. And that's what the Monkey King does. When you look at what he does, like the so-called crimes he commits in the book, it's not really crimes. He just pisses people off, but he doesn't run around killing people. He only kills demons. So it's kind of you're kind of always on his side,
Yeah.
Because Chinese heaven is very bureaucratic and very stiff-backed, and
right. It's a mess.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to apply for a building permit in Chinese heaven.
No,
There's yes, no, excellent. That is the more precise reference. So, so it's worth saying that because of both being public domain and very old and revered, the Monkey King and Journey to the West come up now and then. There's the AMC show Into the Badlands, very loosely structured around a Journey to the West type narrative. And there's some other high-profile projects that are coming up involving a Monkey King character.
Yeah, no, they're starting to cluster, actually. Folks might be aware of the Netflix show New Adventures of Monkey, which is, it sounds like it refers to something else, and it does. There was a Japanese TV show in the 80s, which was shown in Australia and was very popular in Australia, and also, of course, all over the Asian cultural sphere, the East Asian cultural sphere. So the New Adventures of Monkey is actually jumping off of Monkey Magic, is what the show was called in Australia. But I've seen the New Adventures of Monkey is also based on Journey to the West, but we don't ever actually see Monkey turn into a monkey, so it's a little frustrating. His powers are different. But there was recently, folks should know, if you're interested in reading Journey to the West, there was recently a new translation released just this year, I think, in February. I think it's called Monkey. I think it's just called Monkey, but I'm not sure. And but you could check it out. New translation of Journey to the West, and if you Google that, you'll find it. And apparently, I haven't read it yet, but it's supposed to be very, very user friendly for Americans and Westerners. So that might be a good place to start. But like I said, recently there have been clusters. 15, 20 years ago, Jean Luen Yang started writing the comic book, the graphic novel, American Born Chinese, which is based on the Monkey King story at the beginning of Journey to the West. But now Jean has started a new superhero with DC Comics. Gene has also written for Marvel, but he's writing a new superhero for DC Comics called The Monkey Prince, which just debuted this month in a DC sort of anthology of short stories, short comic stories by and about Asian American superheroes. And at the very end of this is the introduction to the Monkey Prince, who is apparently the son of the Monkey King. Although how that happened exactly hasn't really been explained in the comic yet. But he's the son of the Monkey King, who was being raised by Pigsy, the pig demon, and by a white and Chinese human couple in the States. So that's happening. And then, of course, you might know more about this than I do, this new project that's being crowdfunded, which is a comic book graphic novel version, like a contemporary urban version of urban fantasy version of Journey to the West that you guys have been talking about on NOC.
Yeah, with Keith's colleague Jerry Ma. He's doing another iteration. And I think, I mean, all this is cool. But I think, is it fair to say out of all the Monkey King versions, first of all, one of his main powers is being a shapeshifter. That's core to his identity. But I don't think there are too many versions where he's a woman or a young woman. And would you like to talk a little bit about that?
No, the only thing he can fool people by taking on the appearance of a different person, and he does. But he is definitely a male creature, a male monkey, a male human. When he takes on human form, he generally goes into male form. But he is a male monkey, no question. He's a king, and so I thought it would be fun to have a female character, female monkey, female human, with all the Monkey King's powers, and see where that went. And originally the idea was that she would be his daughter. But then when I thought about the Monkey King is a little bit asexual, not entirely, but he, the way he's presented, he is kind of an eternal sprite, a kind of puckish character. And the other characters, Pigsy especially, are more lascivious. But Monkey isn't generally depicted as terribly lascivious. So thinking about the Monkey King actually getting down with somebody to create a kid the traditional way is kind of hard to conceive of.
A whole lot of explanation would have to happen.
Yeah. So I rethought that whole idea, and I'm not going to explain it right now because I'm hoping this book turns into a series, and we will discover Maya's origins later on. But Maya is clearly some kind of descendant or derivative of the Monkey King. Only she's female. She's a woman, and of course that changes an enormous amount about how she interacts with the world and how she feels about her powers and about her being and presence.
Yeah. And as we were talking about, the sort of superhero iterations of this, if I may say, the book starts in a very superhero comic sort of way. I mean, just sort of on a Mission Impossible type mission, and there's a fight, and it has that kind of, kinetic energy about it. I mean, do you want to talk about how that style informs the story?
Well, I love martial arts, and I was talking with someone. There was someone wrote an article recently about martial arts and Asian Americans and Asian American identity, and of course, we all grew up. A lot of us, or most of us, grew up being asked if we did martial arts, and having our identities associated with martial arts and martial arts movies and Bruce Lee and so forth. Bruce Lee being the only positive Asian American role model a lot of us were able to grow up with. Mm-hmm. But also for me, martial arts pop culture was the first place I was able to actually see myself represented. I mean, I'm mixed race, Chinese and white. And the first time I ever saw a mixed race Chinese and white character was in a Hong Kong Kung Fu movie that my dad took me to see when I was 6. And generally my parents didn't take me to see action movies because they thought they were too violent when I was a kid. But I'm pretty sure my dad took me to this one because one of the two heroes was mixed race. He was a Chinese actor with dyed orange hair, but
okay, cool.
But he was supposed to be a mixed race character, and
do we remember the name of this movie, or
I don't remember. It was one of the millions of trashy Hong Kong kung fu movies that came out in 1976. But it wasn't very good. But this guy, and this guy was literally in whiteface, but it was the first time I'd ever seen myself on the screen, and then shortly thereafter. I started seeing, and the show had come out before, I think, but I started seeing David Carradine in Kung Fu, the TV show. And I know a lot of Asian Americans have, really bad reactions to David Carradine in Yellowface. But for me, I thought he actually was mixed. And it meant so much to me to see.
I did too. I always thought he was a mixed guy. He just has a certain look.
Yeah, and I thought he was real. I think he was for real, and to see him being the hero of this entire show, running around doing martial arts. So even though I didn't actually study martial arts until I got to college, I identified closely with that, kind of in my deepest heart of hearts. So yeah, to have a character who is really good at fighting and loves to fight, just really enjoys her power and really enjoys fighting, was just essential for building this character and building this world for me, because that's the Monkey King in a nutshell. Monkey King loves to fight. He loves to show off.
He likes to tussle.
He likes to tussle, and he worked really hard for those skills. So he loves to show them off. So to have a female character who really enjoys that thing was really important to me. And it was important to have those fight scenes all over the book, because when we meet her, she's having a fight that for her is fun. For the other person, it's not quite so fun, but for her, it's a lot of fun. And then she has another fun fight, and then she meets an opponent whom she can't quite get the better of, and she's always having to hold herself back to prevent herself from hurting other people. And then she meets an opponent she can't quite get the better of, and as they move through the story, this opponent gets stronger and stronger and starts to get the better of her, and that becomes really scary for her. So, but yeah, that for me is a big identity moment.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. And okay, if I could shift aspect a little bit, it also seems very Bay Area specific. Just from what I've read so far, and again, as a Berkeley East Bay person, I'm interested in that kind of thing. And I also always say, don't take this the wrong way. It is almost like in Asian American literature, it is something that's almost a cliche that it happens in San Francisco, but it's a cliche. You know what I mean? But it's a cliche for a reason.
Yes.
San Francisco is where all the shit happens.
Yes.
So, I hope I make that distinction clear. It's just, it's kind of like in the Marvel comics, it's like, oh, we're in New York again. Oh, a guy accidentally got superpowers in New York again. What a coincidence. On the American side of the spectrum, it's just like, oh, wait, there's another secret mythology of magic underneath San Francisco, and it involves Chinese people. Oh, who'd have thunk? But I sorry, not trying to be reductive, but if you can talk about.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the thing about San Francisco Chinatown being so big and being so famous, it's typically represented, particularly in urban fantasy, as a piece of China, excised from China and brought to the United States. And of course, those of us who grew up in and around, or constantly going to Chinatowns, know that Chinatowns and other similar ethnic enclaves, are not pieces of the other country. They're pieces of America. They're, although the Chinatowns everywhere in the world are hybrids of the country that they're in and the culture that's being brought to that country. And ethnic enclaves are these engines of entry and assimilation for new groups of immigrants. So San Francisco Chinatown is not a piece of China brought to America. San Francisco Chinatown is a piece of San Francisco. It's a piece of America. And it has its own flavor. It's not like any other Chinatown in the world. Every Chinatown is different. Yeah. And San Francisco Chinatown is very specific and very particular. And I wanted to show that. There's a certain use I make of San Francisco Chinatown in this story. And I wanted to show that it is a place where real people live who are Asian American and who don't just function in Chinatown, and the Chinatown has a place in the lives of people who don't live in Chinatown as well. So sorry, that was a little incoherent, but
oh, I found it very coherent. But also, and then for those out there who may think of the Bay Area as San Francisco, which is another sort of long-standing geographical stereotype. So your story is set in 2011 and involves the Occupy Oakland movement you mentioned.
Yeah. Yes. Well, Maya actually lives in San Francisco, but she works in Oakland. like a lot of people in the Bay Area. She works at a cafe, which is actually a supernatural sanctuary, which is located on Telegraph Avenue in Oakland. And so she spends all day there. And she also does her boss at this supernatural sanctuary is human, but she's a magic user. And so she does various favors and gigs and jobs, investigative jobs and acquisition jobs for people in the supernatural community. And so when she needs a superpowered person to do these jobs for her, she hires Maya. So one of the things that Maya is doing at the beginning of the book is she is looking for a Filipina Aswang who has disappeared. And she's the leader of the Aswang community. Aswang are Filipino vampires, shape-shifting vampires. Yeah. And she's looking for this Aswang who's disappeared, but she's the leader of the Aswang community who live in Colma because among other things, Aswang.
That's where Aswang live, aren't they?
Well,
you know that?
They have to live in Colma because, among other things, Aswang like to eat corpses. And, where are you going to find the best corpses in the Bay Area but Colma? But anyway, she's disappeared. So Maya's tasked with finding her. So she's wandering around trying to find her. And because she spent so much time in Oakland and because she's an activist, she got swept up into the Occupy Oakland movement. So she's involved in Occupy Oakland, and we get to see the encampment in the book, and we get to see the protests and the fighting with the police when the encampments were finally cleared later in October of that year. So all of that's in there. We get to see Oakland, we get to see Berkeley, we get to see a tiny bit of Colma, not really, a little, she flies down there, but we don't get to see Colma. But yeah, it's Bay Area wide.
Okay. That's rad. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about just the process of writing the book, from the premise and how it came to be with this particular publisher, of the timeline of it.
Well, one thing I should mention is I have what's called ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, and I've had that for about 11 years. And prior to that, I was writing very kind of labor and concentration intensive science fictional short stories, like kind of literary science fictional short stories. And my process was just basically take every ounce of energy in your mind and throw it at an idea until something comes out of it. And once I got sick, this illness has certain cognitive effects, like the inability to concentrate and for long periods of time and brain fog. So I wasn't able to write using my old process. So I started writing to outline. And so this book, I actually sat down and wrote out a complete outline, scene by scene, before I wrote it. So I knew what kind of story I had before I actually started writing the words on the page. And that took me because I wasn't getting treatment for the first 6 years of my illness. So it took me about 5 years to draft the book. And at the end near the end of the process, I started getting treatment. And so things started I started improving and things started speeding up. And then, I just went through the traditional process. I found an agent. The agent started shopping the book around. We found a publisher.
Was this before or after your other collection?
My previous collection was published in December 2009.
Okay.
And that was literally the moment I got sick.
Okay.
It came out in December 2009. At the end of December 2009 was when I first got sick.
Yeah.
So the previous collection was written in the using my old process, which I don't have the energy to do anymore. Mm-hmm. And then I couldn't write at all. I tried, but I couldn't write at all for about 3 or 4 years. And then I thought, okay, I need to switch things up and try writing in a different way. Mm. So when you outline things out in advance, you do end up with very highly structured things, and it's much easier to do something that's very genre specific and very tropey. So I just decided that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a very genre-specific, tropey urban fantasy, but I'm going to subvert it by having all the characters be people of color.
Yeah.
And all of the mythologies that the supernatural creatures are drawn from be non-Western.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's great. Well, I mean, I appreciate you talking about that. I mean, I love talking about this kind of thing. I'm a writerly person also. And, I would venture to say, like, under any situation, the actual act of writing is a funny one because that it is, not physically taxing, and yet it is also exhausting.
Yes.
And so, and then exacerbated by medical condition, I could see, like, you would somehow arm yourself with a new process. I think that's fascinating. I mean, how much you stare at a screen before you don't stare at it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. And the thing is, when you're healthy, or more or less healthy, when you do not have a fatigue-causing illness, you don't realize that you have endless energy. You get tired and you go to sleep, but if somebody wakes you up in the middle of the night and says, "Go do this," it's an emergency, you have the energy to go do that thing in an emergency. And with the fatigue-causing illness, you just don't have the energy. You have, maybe 2, 3, like at the beginning, a couple of hours of energy for the entire day. And later on, as I got better and better, I was able to work longer and longer. And some days, some good days, I can work 3-4 hours. But basically, I had to have a process where I could write 1 to 2 hours a day and still get something done, because many days, still, even today, many days, I only have 1 to 2 hours of working energy for a day. And like I said, if I'm lucky, I get 3, 4, sometimes even 5 hours. But I have to have a process where I can focus for an hour and then go rest without losing the track of what I'm doing. And this is the way, and outlining is the way to go.
Cool. No, I get you. And then it bore fruit. And then would you like to say, like, how it came to be at this publisher, or?
Well, we sent it to all of the major publishers that might be interested in all of the publishers that might be interested in an urban fantasy of this type, who also pay, because I was working with an agent, Amanda Lurk, who's amazing, from Spencer Hill Associates. They get paid from a percentage of your advance. So you need to get a publisher who's willing to pay a substantial advance. So that's, imprints of the big 5, which are now the big 4, I guess, and then larger independents. And so Rebellion, which is a UK-based a sort of mini conglomerate of gaming companies and publishing companies and media companies. They have 2 book imprints, and one of them is Solaris. Okay. They were interested. The editor that I worked with, Kate Coe, was particularly interested in the voice and the characters, but I think she was looking for, not to speak for her, but I think she was looking for an own voices adult fantasy. So, and they also publish, I believe they published Yoon Ha Lee as well. And I'm sorry, but what short-term memory lapses is another issue of chronic fatigue syndrome. So I always forget names and titles. That's the thing that I always forget. But there are a number of own voices sci-fi and fantasy writers at Solaris who are amazing, whose names I can't think of right now. Okay. But anyway, so that's how that happened, and I was very pleased. Obviously, you want your book to get the best place with the best publishers, but when it comes down to it, you want your editors, you want your publishers to love your book and really, really be behind it, and they really have been. So, yeah, that is the best place for your book, is with people who are just cheering it on and doing their best for it. So.
Cool.
We'll be out in ebook, paperback, and audiobook at all your usual bookstore locations. So online.
Okay. And this is in August?
This is August 3rd. It's ready for pre-order now. you can pre-order the paperback and the ebook now, and everything will be released on August 3rd. So.
Okay, great. Do you like to be contacted on the internet? Do you have an internet presence you would like to mention?
Oh yes. So you can contact me most easily on Twitter. I am at Seelight. That's SEELIGHT. It's a pun. You can also find me at ClaireLight, CLAIRELIGHT.org on the internet. And if you Google Claire Light or JD Jang, you can find me. One of the benefits of the pen name JD Jang is that literally no one else on the internet has it.
Yeah.
There are no
HBO,
other JD Jangs
yeah.
on the internet. So yeah, you can find me pretty easily.
Are you having a significant Asian American History Month, or
I'm having
good about it or bad about it?
I am a little bummed that we're not releasing it in May, although it might not. The book might not have penetrated the noise if we had released it in May. But actually, keep an eye out on the internet. I'll be announcing this on Twitter. But we'll be doing a number of hybrid in-person online events, as well as online only events in August and September. We're doing one with the Asian Art Museum, and I will be doing a reading at the end of July with FogCon, which is our local con here in the Bay Area. So you can find those on my Twitter and on my website as well when those are firmed up. So we're going to have I'm going to enact a little mini API Heritage Month in August and September for myself.
Sure. Cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Claire, and thank you, JD, and everyone in between. And we'll have more details about Monkey Around as it approaches the publication date.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we're back. That was Dominic Ma with Claire Light talking about her new book, Monkeying Around. Now we're going to get into what's Nerd Poppin'. Brittany, what's Nerd Poppin' with you?
I don't know if this counts for this podcast, but I ordered a Barbie makeup collection, and I am obsessed. I just got it the other day. I've always liked Barbie, and speaking about animation too, I always liked the show Barbie Dreamhouse. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, so I'm very excited to add to my Barbie stuff, and yeah, I don't know if that counts for Nerd Poppin', but I'm nerding out about it. What's the
special part of the Barbie makeup collection, or a special part you can mention?
I really like the lipsticks because it has the old school Barbie logo on them. If you remember the old school Barbie silhouette logo, the bee and then the Barbie's face or whatever. I really love that on the lipstick. That's my favorite, and it makes me want to rewatch Barbie Dreamhouse.
That's awesome. Of course, that totally fits. I mean, Barbie is a toy, and toys are part of nerd culture.
Yeah, so if you haven't watched Barbie Dreamhouse, I highly recommend it, especially if you like reality shows. It's literally Barbie and all the different Ken and Midge and all of them, and they're living in the dream house, and it's really funny. I like it. It's hilarious. Some parts I'm I don't know if this is for kids, even though it's supposed to be for kids. That's really funny. I like it.
Wait, wasn't Midge one of the characters in Voltron? Or am I
That's
making
Pidge.
that up? Pidge, sorry.
I think her friend, his name is Midge. That's the one. And they made her Southern on the show. She's like, "Hi, y'all, Barbie. I'm so excited to see you and be here with you." And it's just wow. It's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dominic, what's Nerd Poppin'?
Oh, well, I don't know if this counts, but BTS came out with their second English language single this Friday. I'm trying to catch up to the BTS thing. Have you guys listened to the new BTS song?
I did. It's
Butter?
It's smooth like butter.
Yeah. I don't think it's as clever a song as Dynamite, but it is pretty much a bop. And it has a instant classic misheard lyric that I don't know if people are...
Oh wait, what's the misheard lyric? Because my family and I were literally just listening to it with the lyrics playing. So what is the?
Well, in the second verse, he sings, it's supposedly supposed to be "I'll sweep you up like a robber," which is already a weird phrase. The way he sings it, it almost certainly is "I'll slip you on like a rubber," which is it's a slightly too far. A little bit too far for a teen pop oriented thing, but I think it's clearly intentional And, the English producers left in there. I mean, they know the guys are singing in ESL English. And I don't mean ESL English in a pejorative way. ESL English is probably one of the most spoken languages in the world. It's just like slightly modified English. And anyway, so I thought that was pretty funny.
It's quite a time for Asian Americans, since it's the tail end of the API Heritage Month, it's quite a time for Asian Americans on the pop charts, because I think BTS has the #1 record in the country. Olivia Rodrigo's Sour just came out.
I love that album.
Which is
sorry.
No, yeah.
Is it? Is it good?
It is, and it's like everything like 18-year-old me needed from an album. Who had just, like, I also had my heart broken by a guy named Josh when I was 17, 18 years old.
Like when Britney got her driver's license, she would drive by his house all the time, too.
So it just hit, that album really hit for me. And I'm like, yes, I feel like it healed my soul a little bit, because, like, I don't know, I think getting your heart broken so badly at that age really sometimes defines the rest of your life. So I was just like, I felt this, I needed this.
Yeah.
It was very healing. So I know I'm a millennial, but, like, it was healing. I needed that.
But
so
with all this BTS and Olivia Rodrigo kind of like topping the charts, we need that Silk Sonic album, like, Toot Sweet, Bruno and Anderson, because we just need a complete, like, sweep of the top 10 with Asian American artists, because the other big Asian American music story from this week is the Linda Lindas. Did you guys see the video from the LA Public Library?
Racist Sexist Boy is a jam.
That is a jam.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
And some people might not know, since we were talking about giant robots on this episode, Eloise, the lead singer and guitarist of the Linda Lindas, is the daughter of Martin Wong, one of the co-founders of the giant robot magazine Empire.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I'm pretty much, I'll say 99.9% sure that they're named after this song by a Japanese punk band. Oh, so what? There's a film called
Sorry, go on.
No, what's the film?
I'll add. Well, yeah. Also pretty sure they're named after the song "Linda, Linda, Linda" by the Blue Hearts, the Japanese Ramones, essentially. Great song, and someone made a movie called Linda, Linda, Linda. It's a Japanese movie that was doing a film festival circuit some number of years ago. So,
does
people
that predate
who went to
the Blue Hearts, or does Blue Hearts predate the movie?
The Blue Hearts were a band
in the 80s.
in Japan in the 80s or something like that. I want to say, early aughts, within the last 20 years, someone made this movie that was basically about a bunch of teenage girls in Japan forming a band to play the Blue Hearts song. I'm sure someone who goes to Asian American film festivals saw this movie, as I did, and it was a gateway into like fascination with the Blue Hearts and the song. And the premise is like, it's some Japanese girls, but they have to find a Korean girl, to like exchange student, to be the lead singer, and she doesn't speak Japanese that well. It's a delightful. It's a delightful.
Oh wow!
Movie.
I didn't know they made a movie, because I'm very familiar with the song, and I had no idea that they made a movie about
Fantastic.
that.
Oh, Keith, you should treat yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up now.
That one is very kid friendly.
So shout out to the Linda Lindas, because not only did they go viral with Racist Sexist Weird, but they signed with Epitaph Records this week, which is shout out to the Linda Lindas.
So now that video of them performing in the library is on the Epitaph Records YouTube. Yeah, because I was listening to it yesterday on YouTube. I was looking it up. And I was like, oh, this is so fun. I love that they're like punk, though. They're not pop punk, which I love pop punk. Anyone who knows me, I love pop punk and like the emo bands. Like, that is my wheelhouse. But I like that like the Linda Lindas are like... real, like they're punk.
For real punk rock.
Yeah, and American audiences discovered them because of Moxie, the Amy Poehler Netflix movie that they cameo in.
I've never seen that yet.
Yeah, you should check that out, because that's where most folks over here figured out who they were. I say over. I mean, the Linda Lindas are from California. It's not. I'm not talking about the Blue Hearts. I'm talking about the Linda Lindas, a bunch of like 13-year-old girls from California. But they had their big break for like the mainstream on the movie Moxie, and now like Racist Sexist Boy just went crazy on the internet, and now they signed to a goddamn punk record label. It's awesome.
Is that your nerd popping this week?
It's not, but you were talking about like BTS, and I was just like, wow, Asian Americans are having a moment in pop music right now, because we talk about like all the cartoons, like as a kid who loved hip hop and R&B and punk music, and like never once saw the only reason I liked the Smashing Pumpkins when I was a kid is because James Iha played guitar for them.
Yeah.
I could give a shit about like Billy Corgan. I was like, and I love Lush because Mickey Berenyi, right? Like it was like those were the only Asians I could find in my musical wheelhouses back in the late 80s,
Another
early
fun
90s.
trivial cinemaphile fact, James Yeha of Smashing Pumpkins did the score for Linda, 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 the movie I was just referring to.
Well, it was kismet that we were to talk about it. No, but so my Nerd Poppin's really silly. I'm a big toy guy, as you guys know. In fact, my new podcast, Shelf Conscious, the trailer is out now, and the very first episode will be dropping later this week. I'm big into toys, and Hasbro announced a whole bunch of Marvel Legends figures based on, the MCU. And the 3 figures that they announced this week are, like, I was kind of stopping my collecting of Marvel Legends figures because, like, I got all the Shang-Chi. Remember Aquafina attacked me in the middle of a podcast? I said I wasn't going to buy the Shang-Chi figures. I ended up buying all of the Shang-Chi
Suggesting
figures.
that there might be an overflow. I don't know. Just like there might be a few that are like falling off the edge. But
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And then I was like, okay, I'm after Shang-Chi figures. I'm not going to buy anymore. And then they announced a whole wave of Disney Plus figures with like, Sam in his Captain America costume and Loki in his TVA jacket, which is wild because that show's not even out yet. And I'm like, fuck, I got to get that because you have to buy every character in the wave to get all of Sam's wings. Because that's how
wow.
that's how they get you, right?
That's smart. I love it.
You make his broken wings whole.
Yeah. And learn to fly again and all that. But then the 3 figures they announced this week were like, 1, I didn't even know I wanted, and 2 were in my, like, if they ever would make these, I would buy them list. And so the one I didn't expect ever happening is, do you remember, speaking of Thor Ragnarok, the giant held spawn demon Surtur from the beginning and end of the movie?
Yes.
Yeah. So they've made a 13-inch version of Surtur.
Big Surtur. Wow.
That looks awesome. He's like, his skin's decaying and he's flames everywhere. So I was like, holy crap, that's really cool. I may have to buy that. I have nowhere to put it, but, I have a problem. The second figure was...
It's important to recognize that you have a problem.
They're releasing a Captain America from Infinity War figure.
Oh, the beard.
With the beard. And here's the thing, like, they actually released a version of that figure when the movie came out 4 years ago, but it looked nothing like Chris Evans. Like, he didn't have both Wakandan shields. He only had, like, one really big one because it was based on, I guess, concept art. And I have that figure. And even though it's not accurate to the movie, I have a problem. And it said Marvel Legends. And I only collect the movie Marvel Legends figures. If I were to collect like literally every Marvel Legends figure, I'd be broke. But I have it, and now I have to get the one that actually looks like Chris Evans and is more screen accurate.
That was a good look for him. I thought that was one of the
that's
best
one of the most
Captain American
iconic Captain America looks, right? With the beard and everything. And then finally, they're releasing an Obadiah Stane and Ironmonger 2-pack.
What?
With a Jeff Bridges head sculpt that is like straight out of the movie. And again, I was like, they're never going to make this character, and they've made it, and now I have to fucking buy it.
Now, can you extract Jeff Bridges out of his armor, or is it just his head?
No,
figure?
So, again, when Iron Man first came out, they made a version of the figure of just Ironmonger that you could lift open his head, and it would be a little Jeff Bridges head inside. But that toy was not in scale with the Iron Man figure that came out at the same time. So like when you open Ironmonger's head, it had a little tiny Jeff Bridges. So if you put them next to your Tony Stark Iron Man, they would be wildly out of scale.
Yeah, now, they can't reenact the scene where they argue about the stock price.
Right. Now that you have and it's a 2-pack. So it would be cool if you could fit, Jeff Bridges inside the armor, but you can't. So it's fine. I wonder if you can pop his head off and stick it inside or not. That might be a little secret thing that they haven't announced yet. But anyway, there was a reason I started my own podcast talking about toys, so I don't have to bore you guys with this.
There's no reason to be shelf-conscious, Keith. I love talking about toys with you.
So yeah, that's what's Nerd Poppin' with me. Anyway, that's it for this week. Shout out to Claire Light for talking with Dominic. Get her book. Do we have a pub date for her book?
I believe she said in a couple months.
So be on the lookout for that. Again, be on the lookout for the Shelf Conscious podcast first episode dropping this week. Other than that, Brittany, how can people get in touch with you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at HiBrittanyMonet. I also do the Black Lightning podcast, which we are nearing the end. You can follow that at BL_podcast. I just did a guest spot. I don't know if it's out yet, but with Sisters with Sabers, which is I think I talked about it last time. It's not out yet, I don't think, but it's basically a nerd podcast of all black women who love Star Wars. And you can follow them on Twitter at SabersWith.
Awesome. Dominic.
I'm at Domah, DOMMAH, on Twitter or Instagram.
You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_chow, and follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color. Go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all of the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts. Give us a rating and review if you do. Subscribe to our videos at youtube.com/the Nerds of Color. Give us a like and subscribe there as well. Buy merchandise at tpublic.com. Support us on GoFundMe or at patreon.com/the Nerds of Color. And until next time.
Wonderbat. For the happiness of our co-host.
I appreciate it.
Racist, sexist boy, we rebuild what you destroy.
Yes.
Even better.
Bye, everybody.